a tension or a paradox that I'm experiencing in this work. And it's kind of my, I guess, a greening edge for me. And it's a greening edge around which there is lots of language that's been there for a while, but it's like I'm kind of, I'm kind of growing into the language, or the language is starting to have some actual meaning for me. And hopefully that will make sense as I go on to share. So the theme, or the tension that I experience, is around how we are present within the natural world as a place of liveliness and as a sacred space, how we're present and how we engage and interact with that in that space, and how we do it not from a position of extraction. So I have all of this energy around not wanting to use the earth for my personal privilege. So it's a tension that I struggle with. So I'm going to read something that I wrote, and then I'm going to share about how the journey has gone. Okay. And some of you may have read this. It's on the website. So Karl Rahner said, if the church is going to survive, perhaps we all need to become mystics. Perhaps if humans are going to survive on the earth, we need to become eco-mystics. And what on Tuesday morning is that? I think a mystic is someone who periodically, and or, if they're lucky, pervasively, has a sense of being part of something more themselves, of being more alive, who feels the imminence of the good intentions of the universe, who feels connected, known, and integrated within a generative and creative love. This love is both within them and outside of them. So what's an eco-mystic? An eco-mystic is someone who is developing the capacity to experience an awe-filled, hands-off, non-colonizing, thank you, Hélène, delight in all the manifestations of life. So an awe-filled, hands-off, non-colonizing delight in all the manifestations of life. In the copper-backed bee busy at the edge of the path, the shoving purple Chinook sky, the green shoulder of the prairie hillside, and the luminous glow of red begonias in heavy green shade. Eco-mystics have a delicious sense of the thisness of things, which has nothing to do with them. A sense of how every manifestation of life has its own story, its own trajectory of lifefulness and death, its own innate beauty, integrity, and worth. At the same time, eco-mystics feel the soles of their feet on the earth, thank you, Dennis, know the restoration of breath in and out of their bodies, I think Marianne mentioned that, and experience the touch of moving air on their skin. In their fierce desire to be present to what is, without reference to self, they discover a dynamic, vibrating aliveness of life, and sometimes experience themselves as solid, tangible, and integral within that life. In losing their lives by giving themselves away in their still, open, non-grasping, energy, full attention, they find themselves to be altogether different. So on the one hand, I see my conundrums as a ribbon. On one hand, at the end of this kind of paradox is this way of being in the world, or coming to the world, which is open, without a lot of language, present to what is, experiencing it through our senses, just receiving what is as it is. And on the other hand, even in our, the book we've been using, Field Guide to Nature Meditations, 52 mindfulness practices for joy, wisdom, and wonder, there is the sense that, of course, because we are of the earth, from the earth, go back to the earth, designed to know the earth, we experience goodness and we look for the sacred in the earth, and we're making meaning of the stories that we experience all the time. And so there's this sense that we're always taking as well. And so so I was feeling this kind of like, this tension between, I don't want to just go and stamp Sarah all over the planet. I want the planet to be its own self. I just don't want to stamp my story all over everything. I want it to be itself. Just like when you guys kept coming in with Sarah all over you. It's like, I don't want to do that. I want it to be, I want it to be its own self. So I was feeling the tension of this, right? I was feeling like, and I've been thinking about paradox as a ribbon. And I was thinking that I'm tied up in this ribbon. I'm stuck, right? So in the tension of this and feeling some anxiety, because Tuesday morning was coming and it was about 11 o'clock, and I was like, what am I going to say? I'm like wrapped up and I'm tight and I don't know what. So taking Rosie for a walk, the lovely dog that some of you have heard, I thought I'm going to step out the door and I'm going to ask, I'm just going to say to the earth as I'm moving outside of my physical space, what, like how, like where, like, I don't know. So as I walked to the end of my courtyard to go down the stairs to go around the block, and who should I see and who should I hear but a flicker? And flickers are beautiful birds. Anyway, I have been having a complete and absolute love affair with flickers since the spring. I first walked down my street in the spring and saw maybe three fans of orange in the trees. There's no leaves at this time. And I see these three fans of orange and red in the trees. It's like, what is that? Like, what is that in the tree? And as I got closer and got underneath it, this was just on my street, it's flickers. So it's maybe male flickers, like displaying their tail feathers in this beautiful, curved array of color. And I'm looking up and like, wow, that is like so cool. I've never seen that before. And then I hear the tap, 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 tap. So how many know flickers in their tap, 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 tap? Maybe you can put your hands up if that's part of your knowing. They tap on the telephone poles, and it's part of their mating experience, right? Like they're and so I'm hearing this tap tap tap, and I'm seeing and there's one bird tapping and there's other birds displaying, and then I'm like, oh wow, this is so incredible. So I go home and I Google flickers, and I find out that flickers have a little mating dance that they do where they go coo 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 coo, and they do this head bob thing with one another, and they go coo 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 coo, and then they do this head bob thing. So then what happened was I started to move through my neighborhood, and I could hear this coo 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 coo. So I would stop and I would look up and I would spot, and then I could see them doing this mating dance, right? So I would start to be traveling down the road, and I would have my windows open and I would hear it, and I stop my car and I look up in the tree, and yeah, there's two or three flickers, doing their thing, right? So it was this absolutely enlivening sense of this world and space around me that was having its own life. And then the story gets better, because what happens is, as I'm walking down my street, again, in the same space where I'd seen all the lovely courtship going on, I see a hole, and I see this beautiful large flicker, whoop, boom, down into the hole. I'm like, oh my goodness, is this a nest? Right? So flicker goes down into the hole. So then what happens is every morning when I'm walking back and forth, I stop and I look up, and sometimes I see the flicker sitting there with his head poking out of the nest, or her head poking out of the nest, right? And other times they'll be sitting on a branch looking at the hole. So every morning I'm walking by, and some mornings there's nothing there. Some mornings I'm standing there probably looking like an idiot in the middle of the street, just looking up, standing still to see this little, and then the leaves start to come, so I can hardly see the hole, and I'm trying to see if the bird's in there. And then finally, I think at the very end, I can hear the babies, right? I can hear the babies in the tree. And then I can kind of maybe see, like at the end, I think I had a moment of maybe seeing some little heads peeking out. And so I had this whole experience with these flickers, right? And then it's been fabulous. And actually, in one of those in that journey, one of the things that happened, as I had been so curious and present and standing underneath and gawking up at the hole. Brian Swim talks about the practice of gawking. As I'm standing there gawking, the next I come home, make a cup of come go to my sink to make a cup of tea, and there is this gorgeous flicker on a branch just outside my window, sitting there in color because the sun is on it, and it's just like alive and beautiful. So I just had this lovely. So this is what came to me, and I thought, okay, so it's not about extraction. We don't want to go there, even though we have 400 years of unlearning to do. That's a lot of unlearning, a lot of neural pathways that have been set up in us about using the earth. It's a huge job, but it is about connection, right? And so I know there's that language that many of you are probably more familiar than I am with, of kinship. There's this sense of connection, that we're cousins, that we're uh, together, that the indigenous people have had more of a relationship of kinship with the earth. So there's that language. So it feels like, okay, that's some language to move into or to grow into. And I thought for me also, from the tradition that I'm part of, perhaps there is the language of neighbors. So I come from a tradition which talks about loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. So perhaps there's also that another kind of model and way of thinking and speaking about it as neighbors, as cohabitating, as coexisting together in this amazing wild and earth that we're part of. So it felt like my paradox, my tightness found some space, some possibility of moving forward with that. So I wanted to read to you a poem that I wrote a couple of years ago. But as I was starting to think about the language of kinship, I remembered the experience I had and then this poem that came. It's called White Butterfly. It doesn't happen often, fleeting like that white butterfly dancing between the late August grasses. But sweet, when there is that stillness, the leaf lifting a little as a small breeze finds its way into this copse. I can't find the words. I can only say, yes, please, more. Can I just be of the earth, like you, humus, like you, chickadee, like you, elm with the sloughing skin, like you, never known, never remembered space, tracing the shoulder of the earth with my finger, feeling the weight of the sky. I'll read it one more time. White butterfly. It doesn't happen often, fleeting like that white butterfly dancing between the late August grasses, but sweet when there is that stillness. The leaf lifting a little on a small breeze that finds its way into the copse. I can't find the words. I can only say, yes, please, more. Can I just be of the earth, like you, humus, like you, chickadee, like you, bark sloughing off the elm, like you, never known, never remembered space, tracing the shoulder of the earth with my finger, feeling the weight of the sky.